Welcome back, Wolfpack. Verlis here to a facts, stats, trivia, and a top 10 for the dark typing. So dark typing did win out in the vote. Comment down below again which typing you would like to see in the next video, and may I ask for a thumbs up so you guys can show me your support and enjoyment of the series. So starting off, we're going to look at the dark typing defensively. We're going to see that dark is weak to fighting, it is weak to bug, and it is also weak to fairy. Now this is really interesting because the dark typing was introduced as a way to calm down all the psychic types from generation 1, and it did give some bug types some more viability. There's more proof of this because dark is immune to psychic, and it also resists dark typing as well as ghost typing pretty well. Offensively, dark types hit psychic and ghost super effective, and then they are resisted by fighting, fairy, and dark. Looking at the base stat averages for all fully evolved Dark-type Pokemon is pretty interesting because a lot of it is below average except for attack. Then we see a lot of Dark-type Pokemon with just a really high attack. On that, we're not going to be too tanky. Then we see some really low defensive ratings, and it's pretty much you're going to just be known for having some offenses as well as maybe a bit of speed and playing around that. So now time for some Pokemon fun trivia with the Dark typing. So Weavile was the first legendary Pokemon introduced with a base stat total of 680. Mega Tyranitar has the highest base stat total of any legendary Pokemon, and Hoopa Unbound has the highest single base stat of all Dark-type Pokemon with 170 in its special attack. Some other interesting stats about the Dark-type Pokemon is that they only have 3 legendaries, and we mentioned most of them already. It's Darkrai, Weavile, and Hoopa Unbound, and they only make up 6.3% of all Pokemon, including forms and megas, making it 13th in the amount of Pokemon that are Dark-type. And also, there are no Dark-type gyms in the game, so that's actually pretty crazy to think about. And the last little bit of trivia about the Dark typing is the craziness that is the move Bite. Bite started off as a physical, normal type attack. In second generation, when dark typing was introduced, it got changed to a special dark type attack, and now it is a physical dark type attack. So it's done a little bit of everything. It's had its type change as well as its category, that it went from physical to special back to physical. So that's just pretty crazy, and no other move in the game has done something so drastic. So when we look at a dark type offensive attack against all the Pokemon in the game, or at least almost all the Pokemon, PokemonDB.net, which is what I'm using right now, doesn't have every form and every Pokemon listed, so sometimes the numbers are slightly off. We see that dark is actually very reliable. It's not immune by anything. It only has 118 not very effective hits. The rest are neutral and super effective with over 100 super effective hits against Pokemon. That's pretty nice. Also, some really interesting stuff. Also, something really interesting that if you pair dark with fairy, only 3 Pokemon are not very effective against you, and that's going to be Mega Mawile, and Klefki. So fairy steel typing is the only thing that resists a dark and fairy combo, and then you also get a good amount of super effective hits, and these stay about the same on the neutrals. And now it's time for the top 10 dark type Pokemon. So with this list, I'm going to exclude unusable legendary Pokemon as well as Pokemon that gain the dark typing through Mega Evolution, so no Mega Gyarados in this set. Now let's go with number 10, that's going to be Murkrow. Now the reason why I put Murkrow at number 10 instead of Honchkrow is because Murkrow is really good right now, that it has the Prankster ability and Eviolite. So now it has a little bit of extra tankiness, even though it doesn't have the best defensive stats. Eviolite makes it to where it can survive some hits, and then it becomes the ultimate support Pokemon. In double battles, you have access to Feather Dance under priority, so it's going to lower your target's attack by 2 stages, which is effectively cutting it in half on that first usage. You also have Confide, so you get to lower your target's special attack by 1 as well, which means that now you can really make it to where before your opponent attacks, you're keeping your side of the field very safe. You also have access to Roost and kind of a lot of other really crazy things. That Murkrow does have a lot of status that it can play around with. So we're also looking at things like Perish Song. You can do some kind of Perish Song gimmick like that. We also have Torment, Tailwind. Pretty much you become the ultimate support type Pokemon that's also very frustrating to knock out because of Roost. In singles, you can kind of play this a little bit differently by running Toxic. If you run Toxic in singles, you can start throwing a lot of status against all of your opponent's Pokemon, and against physical teams, or even some special teams, it is very, very tricky to knock you out. So you might have to switch out a Pokemon just because it's now at -4, -6 for one of its offensive stats, and if you have Stealth Rocks up, or you have a lot of Toxic and Burn against all of your opponents, it actually starts really wearing them down, and they just can't get over the Murkrow. And in singles, I would recommend Calm Mind. That way we're keeping our special defense boost, and we just have to worry about them switching through physical Pokemon. So Murkrow is actually a very unsuspecting, super frustrating Pokemon that I think needs to be on a top 10 list for Dark-type Pokemon. Next up, we have Zoroark. Now, here's the thing about Zoroark. It has some really good base stats. 105 speed is pretty solid, and 120 special attack is going to be really good, but also its illusion ability. this Pokemon appears as the last Pokemon in the party until it takes direct damage. So you can use Zoroark to mislead your opponent, and in just kind of leading with Zoroark or kind of using it in a really awkward time of the battle, you can get free setup. You can also run physical or special, makes it really hard to predict you, that all of a sudden you just go for a Sword Stance, or you have access to Nasty Plot, and then just access to a lot of cool moves and a lot of really cool outplay potential. That people that build a team around Zoroark can actually get Zoroark to get 2 or 3 KOs really easily, because all of a sudden the setup happens, your opponent doesn't know what to do, they don't know what's going on, and the cool thing is you can also use it like, hey, you put out a Blaziken in the last slot of your team, so you bring in Zoroark, looks like a Blaziken, they're going to try to hit it with a Psychic type attack, you're actually Dark, so that's just a free turn, so you get to do all kinds of crazy things, and then you have access to Night Days. It's actually going to be stronger than a Dark Pulse, and it has a chance to lower your target's accuracy pretty good, like 40%, so you use it twice, good chance they drop their accuracy, which makes it even harder to hit you, and if you got that little bit of outplay with it, Zoroark can snowball pretty hard and just have a lot of surprising damage. Number 8 is going to be Sharpedo and Mega Sharpedo. So regular Sharpedo does have the speed boost ability, which means you run like Protect, you have Sharpedo come in, and then you use Strong Jaw. Strong Jaw is going to give you a 50% power boost to any kind of bite kind of moves, which means now you're getting a lot of really good bonus damage. That Crunch is going to have Stab. It's also going to get Strong Jaw boosted. We're already getting a speed boost, so we don't have to invest too crazily into our speed, which gives us a lot of opportunity to boost our attack. So now we're dealing with very high damage Crunch, very high damage Waterfall, boosted like Ice Fang and other things like that. So then we can just like run, you know, Ice Fang, Waterfall, and whatever else we want from here. Protect to get everything going, and Sharpedo can be really, really good for this. Also, it does have access to Destiny Bond. Destiny Bond is going to make to where after you get your speed boost, you're going to be faster than a lot of Pokemon. You just try to trade some damage, and then you can kind of look at it like, alright, you might even play Risk. You might just use Crunch on that first turn, get the speed boost, Mega Evolve, be faster, secure KO, and now that you're still faster, you just go for the Destiny Bond, and that could be something serious right there for a pretty big trade, or even a good sweep. Near the end of the game, if Sharpedo comes in, it still has some very high base damage spread out across, so it can do at least half of a lot of different Pokemon's health just by going Crunch, 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 and then you win. Number 7 is going to be Drapion. Now, I wanted to put Drapion lower on the list because it is a very powerful Pokemon. It only has one weakness, Ground, and it's only 2 times effective. So it's actually a very, very powerful typing, and it just has a lot of really good utility. So it's a pretty tanky Pokemon with 110 defense, it has Knockoff, it has Taunt, it has Acupressure. It pretty much does whatever you need it to do, but the problem is it has a very high skill cap. That it is like the Swiss Army knife of Pokemon, but at the same time you have to build your team around it, you have to play with it a lot, you have to understand the ins and outs of Drapion, you have to understand when to stall, when to set up, and then if you get all of that right, Drapion can become nearly unstoppable. But because it does take a bit of precision and a lot of team building around it, it does make it a bit difficult to use, which is why it's only number 7 on the list, but is a well-deserved 7. Number 6, Mega Absol. So I haven't really thought too much about Absol. Like, when I first looked at Mega Absol, I was like, it's not that great. But then when you actually start to break it down, it's a Magic Bounce Pokemon. So you can lead with it very reliably, you can't be taunted, you can't do anything, which means you get pretty much guaranteed setup, and your opponent almost always has to throw out attacks, which means you have a very, very reliable Sucker Punch. So Stab Sucker Punch with 150 base attack, you don't even have to worry about speed at that point too much, and then I was thinking Swords Dance. So you go, well, not Swagger, you go Swords Dance. So bulk Swords Dance, I think, is where this Pokemon really shines, and I didn't really realize that initially, then I started using it, and suddenly you can get some pretty serious sweeps right here. Swords Dance, you're doubling your attack to almost 800 at level 100, and then you just throw out Sucker Punch, and they eventually have to hit you. If not, you do have access to, like, Knockoff. Knockoff is going to be pretty good, and then play Rough. So you have good coverage overall, hit a lot of different Pokemon, as we talked about earlier. Fairy and Dark coverage is going to make it to where you're only resisted by 1 type combination, and only 3, technically 2 Pokemon have that combination. So Mega Absol, great coverage, a lot of just speed, priority, reliability, and it just does some really silly things, and Magic Bounce is just one of the strongest abilities in the game. Number 5, I'm looking at Weavile. Weavile just does a lot of really cool things, and it's mostly very strong because of 125 base speed and a 120 attack, so it can also carry an item. You give it like a Life Orb, and then you just play a huge priority game, or just a huge utility game. That we look at like this, we have Fake Out. Boom, that's going to be just speed damage right there. We have Ice Shard. That means we have priority. And this is some of the best dragon killing priority in the game, that you Life Orb into that with Stab and a huge amount of attack. scary things happen, and then it even gets better from there. We can run something like Icicle Crash for just heavy damage and knockoff. So I mean, the stab knockoff with Life Orb, that has some very high chance of getting some neutral KOs, which is very terrifying for any kind of Pokemon, and overall it can also do a lot of other things. You can run substitute sets, you can run focus sash sets, you can run swords dance sets. So you go into the swords dance instead, and now you're getting a 2x boost. You run a focus sash instead of a Life Orb. You only have to worry about priority, and then you're just getting a lot of really reliable outspeeds and just stupid amounts of damage for the win. Alright, number 4 is going to be Greninja. Greninja is very similar to Weavile. That's just a fast Pokemon that wants to go out and throw a lot of crazy damage. You give it a Life Orb, if it hits super effective, that's pretty much a KO. The reason that it is lower than Weavile on the list is because it just has such an amazing amount of coverage. That really good predictive Greninja play can make it to where you can secure a lot of easy KOs, but at the same time it's not any lower on the list because it is a very frail Pokemon. Like, Greninja can't survive a lot of hits, and sometimes even very powerful neutral hits can knock it out, and from time to time you might even see it go down to even a very powerful resisted hit. So overall, Greninja, you know, it's very strong with the Protean ability. It just kind of changes its typing. You can use that for outplays, use that for bonus damage, and again, if you get super effective hits, it works out really well. So better coverage, but still a very frail Pokemon, very weak Pokemon, and it is slightly slower than Weavile, so it doesn't find as many crazy outspeeds, but still a very cool and very crazy Pokemon. Number 3, Bisharp. Bisharp is insane. That it has the Divine ability, which means that this Pokemon's attack is raised by 2 for each of its stats lowered by a foe. An unsuspecting opponent, or just an opponent that's running a lot of Intimidate, you bring in Bisharp, and it's gaining a free +1 from that. And then we have a 125 base attack, potentially Life Orb boosted Sucker Punch, and then you have Swords Dance, you have Knockoff, you have Iron Head, so now you also become a Fairy Killer, and then if you just invest like speed, you outspeed a lot of different Fairy type Pokemon, you have a little bit of defensive takiness, so you might not directly get one shot by just a lot of kind of moves, and it's a Dark Steel typing, you have resistances, and it's pretty much just going to be very good defensively, very good for the type matchups, and you can play it in singles or doubles. Singles, you set up a Swords Dance. Doubles, you just wait for the Intimidate spam, and if your opponent's bringing Intimidate, they really can't stop it. At some point, if a Pokemon goes down and they have to bring in that Intimidate Pokemon, Bisharp becomes the ultimate cleanup. That if you don't have something that can handle Bisharp outright, you're going to be in trouble and maybe even lose the game. So Bisharp has very high damage, very strong priority, and just a good ability with a lot of different options that it can cover up for your team. So it becomes scary really quick. Number 2, Tyranitar and Mega Tyranitar. So Tyranitar has all sorts of things it can do. It can run Dragon Dance, it can run Assault Vest, it can run Citrus Berry, it can run Smooth Rock, it can be a pure Sandstorm support, it can be status, it can do whatever you want it to do, and then it has just really ridiculous base stats. So Tyranitar has a very low speed for pseudo-legendary Pokemon, but then it makes up for it in everything else. 100 hit points, 110 defense, 100 special defense. That is some of the most absurd tankiness we have ever seen, and then we still have 134 attack. So we have some of the highest attack on the list as well, and then when you Mega, it just gets better. So you still keep your Sandstream ability, you get even tankier, you have even more attack, and you gain a little bit of speed, but overall, you know, Mega Tyranitar, it just comes in, it Megas, it Dragon Dances, and if you don't have a direct fighting type answer to it, it's over. Also, the Sandstream ability gives it free special defense. So even though its defense is higher, when it comes in with Sandstream, because it's a rock type Pokemon, it gains a 50% boost to special defense. So even hitting it with a super effective like water type attack in sand, it's not going to do anything, Tyranitar, and then it just sets up and steamrolls you. Mega Tyranitar and Tyranitar, very fast, well not fast, but very set up fast Pokemon, very terrifying. And now let's get to number 1, Mega Sableye. Sableye is a crazy Pokemon because it has the Prankster ability, but it didn't have a lot of defensive tankiness. Now comes in Mega Sableye, which is pretty much the perfect tank because of the Magic Bounce ability. The biggest problem of a tank Pokemon is getting taunted, getting whirlwinded, getting status. Like if you don't have any kind of rest or any way of removing status, you get toxic. It doesn't matter how much setup you have on your tank, you're eventually going to go down. Mega Sableye says no to all of that with Magic Bounce, and it also has some very high outplay potential that you lead with regular Sableye. So the turn you Mega Evolve, you still keep your +1 Prankster priority for that turn, which means now you're Calm Minding before your opponent attacks. Now you're getting a Will-O-Wisp before your opponent attacks. You're gaining defensive edge over your opponent before anything happens, and then you have ridiculous defenses. So playing Sableye right means you're not going to get taunted, you're not going to get with status, The only real problem for a Sableye is getting a super heavy special attack crit that's going to hit through all those Calm Mind boosts. On that, you know, just the ultimate Sableye set is going to be Calm Mind. You run Recover, so now you even have Sustain, Will-O-Wisp, so now you take out physical Pokemon really well, and then you go with Dark Pulse, so you're getting Stab on a move that we mentioned before has nothing that is immune by it. You can't stop this, and then you can play maybe even 1 or 2 turns of Prankster. If you don't feel any immediate threat from your opponent, you Calm Mind, then you Prankster until Recover, and then you get even more Calm Minds, Will-O-Wisps, just crazy amounts of outplay. So then we can just like run a Bold Nature, get the most out of our defense, maybe drop our defense a little and give us some base special defense. That way now that we're investing, we just become a very, very hard to kill tank. And if your opponent does not bring Direct Fairy, then Sableye just kind of wins. And even if your opponent does bring Fairy, switch out into a Scizor or some kind of Steel Pokemon like a Bisharp, handle their Fairy type Pokemon, and if they don't have Fairy types, you win with Mega Sableye. That easy. It's that easy. The only other thing that gives Sableye problems are physical Fire type Pokemon because you can't Will-O-Wisp them and drop their attack. Mega Sableye is super scary, super easy to sweep with, and that's what makes it the strongest Dark type in the game. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please tell me what you think about this series in the comments down below, and most importantly, thank you for watching and have a nice day.